Good afternoon. My name is Mark Smith, and today in our teacher breakout session, I will be covering the benefits of small group instruction using the Vygotsky approach. Today's session will include two learning theories that will be useful and impactful to teachers working in small group settings in their classroom. Lev Vygotsky, whose full name is Lev Semenovich Vygotsky, was born November 17, 1896, to Jewish parents in Russia. By profession, he was a psychologist, educator, and social theorist. But when he attended college in Moscow after the ban on Jews was lifted, he studied philosophy and law. He would later die June 11, 1934, in Moscow, the Soviet Union, from tuberculosis. Some of the key contributions Vygotsky made to education was his theory of the social theory of cognitive development. In this theory, it emphasized students working together and through their social interactions, learning would occur. He basically would pair students with different backgrounds, languages, and cultures, and these students, due to the proximity of them in the classroom, they would eventually start to learn from each other, taking material and explain it in different ways that students on their age group would understand. During this research, he proposed the zone of proximal development, which describes the difference between when a teacher is working with a student and how the teacher is at a higher level or zone, and a student who is at a lower level will eventually start taking on information, moving that student closer and closer to the zone where the student and the teacher meet halfway. It's important that Vygotsky advocated that he knew students work best when they came from different cultures and backgrounds, and he wanted them to talk in the classroom. So, one of the major ways that this contributes to our classrooms today is actually pairing our students in small groups and allow them to learn from one another. So, the social culture theory of cognitive development isn't something that's new. People just don't understand that we do it on a daily basis with basically little context or knowledge that we're actually doing it. It's basically allowing how humans interact with one another from different backgrounds, and we started to learn subconsciously from one another, being as either language or religion or just different things that happen around us socially. So maybe in a classroom, you have a student who does not speak English. When pairing that student with an English speaking student, they eventually start taking on some of the language characteristics, and eventually they begin to immerse themselves in the language in which they learn. So, how does this relate to small group instruction? So, typically in today's classroom, after whole group instruction, we like to pair our students in small groups. These working learning groups actually help the teacher uh, one to walk the room and get a better understanding of what's going on in the classroom after they've taught a lesson. In these small working groups, teachers are able to individualize work, they're able to check for understanding and knowledge, and they're also allowing students to learn from one another in an independent setting. This is very beneficial to the teacher because the teacher gets a time to work the room and kind of assess what is going on and if I taught this correctly or do I need to hone in on the students who need additional time. So, how do we apply the zone of proximity to a small group? So, when we're creating our small groups in our classroom, we typically like to look at data as a starting point. So typically teachers like to pair the students who, they're working well independently together and they're comfortable with the material. So you'll have that small working group in one section of the classroom. And then you'll have a smaller group in the back of the classroom or wherever, however your classroom is set up, with students who need a little bit more individualized attention. Typically, we like to use a kidney table so that you can work with that group while the other groups are still working on the material that you've supplied. With the zone of proximity, Lagazzi actually highlights that it's a better working situation when you pair a student from a higher background or a higher learning capacity with a student from a lower. So I'm gonna put all my high flyers in one section, and then I'm going to pair them individually with my lower flyers, and hopefully my high flyers are able to bring those lower flyers up to where I need them to be. So basically allowing them to put them in zones where they all can meet in one place. So how do we apply this to our small groups? Well, first we have to start looking at cultures and languages instead of going for data and numbers. If I have a student who does not speak English, it wouldn't be best for me to put him in a group full of peers that also do not speak English. And that's how you get your zone of proximity. I'm going to pair that student who speaks Spanish with a student who's predominantly in English. And hopefully, that English speaking student is able to give tips and little caveats of where the student needs help, and actually give the student the ability to learn from that student. We can do this when we're differentiating lesson plans, when we're supplying and creating work for different students, and when we're scaffolding lessons to meet students where they're at. We're still going to take, in fact, and look at data. So we're going to check those scores and those test scores, but we're not going to use that as our simple standard to create a small group. So here's some tips and benefits. When you're thinking about the social cultural cognitive development, just remember that students can explain materials in terms that their peers can understand better than what the teacher or the vocabulary, the academic language that teachers use on their daily lesson. So be mindful, when you're trying to explain certain materials. Yes, I can give you the meat and potatoes, but their peers are going to be able to take in the information, the ones who got it well, and then they're going to be able to deliver that same information to their peers. This will creating these small groups based off of these zones will allow the teacher to actually walk the room and really hone in on those students who are not grasping the concept. You're able to modify those groups and then pull them into smaller groups. That way, your higher flyers who are working well with each other, they can get that work done independently, while you can spend more time focused on the students who need more of your attention. These small groups and using this theory allow students to become more independent learners. It allows them to express themselves using the language that they're using in today's society, and allow them to take in information and have these open ideas and learn and develop high yield instructional strategies. And then teachers, we also can apply these same methods to professional development. Every time that we meet, we compare ourselves in different zones, teachers who have more experience with teachers who have less experience, and then those teachers are able to learn through social interactions and plan lesson plans that, kind of meet today's learner where past learners have been. So this approach or theory not only applies to small groups instructions, it also can apply to students and teachers working in the same setting.